Government in political science is a system of order for a nation, states, or another political unit. A government is responsible for creating and enforcing the rules of a society, defense, foreign affairs, the economy, and public services. James Mill was a Scottish historian, economist, political theorist, and philosopher. Good day to all. I, Heidelin Bonales, will be discussing and commenting on Essay on Government by James Mill. And the end of the government, wherein the goods of every human can be determined by his pains and pleasures. If his happiness corresponds with the degree of his pleasures are more and his pains are less, meaning the lot or property that every human has possessed will only depends on his pleasures and pains. Having or owning something that makes you happy that corresponds with his degree of pleasures are great and his pains are small. The sources of human suffering and joy are two. The first is they are produced either by our fellow men, meaning our pleasures and pains depends to other or by causes independent of other men. James Mill also asserted that happiness was becoming whatever the individual wanted to be. We may also assume it as another principle that the concern of government is with the former of the two sources, that the goal of the company is to maximize the pleasures and minimize the difficulties that arise from interaction between men. In the laws of nature on which the condition of a man depends, that the greatest number of consequences, the need of effort, in order to earn the means of existence in the majority of our pleasures. The potential for conflicts is thus limitless, and every man has the ability to rule others in proportion to the number of things that he is able to own. Government as the means is to make the distribution of scanty materials of happiness which would ensure the greatest number of it in the members of the community taken altogether, preventing anyone from tampering with the distribution or depriving any man of more than his fair portion. So the question is it possible for a man to be contented? No, because a man is never satisfied with a smaller degree if he can obtain a greater. No one knows how to be contented as long as he has the opportunity to take all of for himself, to take them from any other man who is weaker than him. Demand is the power over the acts of other men is really boundless or have no limits. It is boundless in two ways: boundless in the number of persons to whom we would extend it, and boundless in its degree over the action of each. Some human beings may be remotely connected with our interests as to make the desire of conformity between our will and their actions. At least with regards to the community's leaders, it is clear that they desire for every one accordance with their wishes. And for the time being, this is the extent of the field we need to cover. Therefore, we view it as a established fact that the community's ruler, whether they are one or a few, want absolute conformity between their wishes and every individual's action. There are two categories of methods that can be used to bring one man's will and another man's action into alignment. The first is pleasures and the second is pains. Pleasure appears to be feeble instrument of obedience in comparison with pain. It is much more easy to despise pleasure than pain. Terror is the grand instrument. Only by being sure that evil will follow any lack of alignment between the will of and the deeds willed can terror be effective. A man desires that the action of other men shall be instantly and accurately correspondent to his will. The very principle of human nature upon which the necessity of government is founded, the propensity of one man to possess himself of the objects of desire at the cost of another, lead on by infallible sequence. Where the control over the town is obtained and there is no check, there is not only the level of lotting that leaves the residents with barely enough to eat, but also the level of cruelty required to maintain the most profound terror. Is it possible for a good government? We may be told that good government appears to be impossible. The people as the body cannot perform the business of government for themselves. It appears that combining two simple types of administration is impossible if the powers of governance are given to the man or a small group of persons, leading to the formation of a monarchy or governing aristocracy. But if it is not yet proved that good government is unattainable, if the people cannot exercise the power of the government themselves, it must entrust to some one individual who have the strongest motives to make bad use of them. There are two propositions which appear to involve a great portion of the inquiry and about which it is unlikely that there will be any dispute. The first is the checking body must have a degree of power sufficient for the business of checking. The one who is responsible for checking must have the degree of power for sufficient checking of business. Second, it must have an identity of interest with the community, otherwise it will make a mischievous use of its power. If it doesn't have a connection to the community, it will abuse its position in a nefarious way. There can be no doubt that if the power is granted to a body of men called representatives, they, like any other men, will use their power not for the advantage of the community but for their own advantage if they can. How are the interest representatives to be identified with those of the community? Each representative may be considered in two capacities: in his capacity of representative, in which he has to exercise of power over others, and in his capacity of member of the community, in which others have the exercise of power over him. The goal will be achieved if circumstances were such that it would be impossible for the representative to act in a way that would benefit him as much as it would cost him, a member of the community. However, there is only one alternative option to reduce the power delegated to the representative. Its scope cannot be altered, and that is in duration. If there is anything that may be used to achieve the goal, it is a shorter duration. It will be more challenging to make up for the sacrifice of the interests of the longer period with the profits of bad governance during the shorter period for which any man retains his capacity as a representative compared to the period for which he is simply a member of the community. For James Mill, the aim of the government was to increase human happiness and only the utilitarian calculation of pleasures and pain.